It is the friendliest question a cop will ever ask you, and that is exactly what makes it dangerous. Picture the moment. You are sitting in your driver's seat, hands on the wheel, license already out. The officer is calm, his tone is light, and he leans in just slightly and says 5 small words. "So, where are you coming from?" You blink, you answer, because that is what humans do when someone asks us a polite question in a polite voice. We answer, but here is what nobody tells you. In the next 90 seconds, that one honest answer is going to be quietly written into a notebook, replayed inside the officer's head, compared against the clock on his dashboard, and used to decide whether you go home in 10 minutes or sit on the shoulder of a road for the next 3 hours. The question was not casual. It was never casual. And by the time most drivers realize that, the damage is already done. Tonight, I am going to show you why that question exists, the Supreme Court ruling that controls it, 2 real federal cases where drivers lost everything because they answered, and the exact 12 words you can say instead. Stay with me. This is the kind of lesson that costs you nothing to learn tonight and could save you everything later. Hit subscribe if you want the law to explain the way nobody taught you in school. Chapter 1. A driver on a Sunday evening. Let us call him Robert. Robert is 38 years old. He works for a small construction company in his state. He had spent the weekend visiting his sister in a neighboring city, 3 hours from home. On Sunday evening, around 7, he was driving back, looking forward to a quiet night with his family. He was going the speed limit. He was wearing a seatbelt. He had nothing illegal in the car, but the highway he was on had a reputation, and the officer who pulled him over knew it well. The highway was a known drug corridor used by traffickers moving between 2 major cities. The officer was part of a state interdiction team trained specifically in highway investigation. The reason for the stop was a small lane drift Robert did not even remember making. The real purpose of the stop, in the officer's mind, was to find a reason to search every car possible. When the officer reached Robert's window, he did the standard greeting, asked for license and registration, and then leaned in slightly and asked the question that Robert had no idea was a turning point. "So, where are you coming from tonight?" Robert, polite by nature, raised by parents who taught him to respect police, answered honestly. He said he was coming from his sister's house in the city 3 hours away. He told the officer the neighborhood. He told the officer how long he had stayed. He told the officer everything because he had nothing to hide, and that single honest answer was about to cost him the next 4 hours of his life. Chapter 2. Why that question exists at all. To understand what happened to Robert, you have to understand why that question exists in the first place, because it is not random and it is not casual. Police academies across the country teach this exact phrasing as part of a documented interrogation strategy known as investigative scope expansion. The question is a tool and the tool has a job, and the job is to give the officer the legal foundation to extend the stop beyond the original reason. What the officer is actually doing when he asks where you're coming from is 4 specific things. He is creating a timeline that can be verified, checked, or contradicted with other evidence. He is gathering information about your origin point to evaluate whether it raises suspicion. He is watching your face and body language for signs of deception while you answer. He is buying time for the K-9 unit, the backup officer, or the records check to arrive. This is why the question is asked so casually. The casual tone is part of the strategy. If the officer asked the same question with authority in his voice, every driver would tighten up and stop talking. By delivering it like small talk, he gets honest answers. And honest answers create the timeline he can later use to justify whatever he wants to do next. The friendlier the question sounds, the more strategic it actually is. Chapter 3. The Supreme Court case that controls this moment. There is a Supreme Court ruling that controls exactly what officers can and cannot do during the kind of question we are talking about, and every American driver should know its name. Rodriguez versus the United States, decided in 2015. The case is short. The ruling is powerful. and the implications for every traffic stop in this country are massive. What Rodriguez actually says comes down to 4 core points. A traffic stop can only last as long as it takes to complete the original mission of the stop. Unrelated questions are permitted only if they do not measurably extend the duration of the stop. Once the original mission is complete, the stop is legally over and the driver must be released. Any extension beyond that point requires new, independent, reasonable suspicion of another crime. This is the ruling Robert needed to know, and it is the ruling the officer absolutely knew. The question about where Robert was coming from was not part of the original mission of the lane drift stop. It was a probing question designed to gather information that might create reasonable suspicion to extend the stop. Under Rodriguez, that probing only stays legal if it does not measurably extend the stop. The second Robert started answering in detail, the timeline of the stop began to stretch, and every additional sentence Robert spoke gave the officer more raw material to work with. Chapter 4, a real case where an answer lost everything. I want to introduce you to a real case from the federal courts because this is not theoretical. United States versus Messias, decided by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in 2011, is one of the clearest examples of how answering travel questions during a traffic stop can completely change the legal posture of the encounter. In the Macias case, 4 important things happened that you need to understand. The driver was pulled over for a routine traffic violation on a Texas highway. The officer asked extensive questions about where the driver was coming from and going. The driver's answers, the officer claimed, were inconsistent and raised reasonable suspicion. That suspicion was used to justify extending the stop and eventually searching the vehicle. The Fifth Circuit ultimately ruled in the driver's favor on appeal, but only after the driver spent years in court fighting the case. The lesson that legal scholars pulled from Macias is one of the most repeated lessons in modern Fourth Amendment law. Travel questions are not innocent. The answers a driver gives during the early minutes of a stop are repeatedly used by officers to justify extensions, searches, and arrests, and the only reliable protection is to not provide the raw material the officer is fishing for in the first place. Macias won eventually, but winning eventually is not the same as not losing today. Chapter 5. A second case that made the news. There is a second case I want you to know about because it shows the pattern from a different angle. State of Ohio versus Robinette, decided by the Supreme Court of the United States in 1996, is a foundational case in how police interactions on the side of the road actually work. The case is older, but the principles are still being applied in courtrooms across America today. The Robinette case established 4 important things that still shape traffic stop law right now. An officer is not required to tell you the original purpose of the stop has been completed. The transition from a lawful detention to a consensual encounter does not require any announcement. Drivers are presumed to know their own legal status during an interaction with police. Anything you volunteer during what you thought was the original stop can be used against you. What Robinette means in plain English is that the officer is under no obligation to tell you when the stop is technically over. He can keep asking questions, and you can keep answering, long after the original legal basis for the stop has expired, and every answer you give in that window is treated as voluntary. The driver in Robinette gave consent to a search after the original stop was already complete, and the evidence found was used against him for years. The Supreme Court ultimately allowed it because nobody had forced him to talk. He had simply kept talking on his own. Chapter 6. The phrase to use instead. Now we come to the part that matters most. The exact phrase you can use the next time an officer asks where you are coming from. This is not a magic spell. It is not a clever loophole. It is a calm, polite, lawful sentence that protects every right you have without creating any new ones for the officer to push against. When the question comes, your response is this: "Officer, I prefer not to answer questions about my travel." That is the entire sentence. 12 words, spoken calmly, spoken once. And the reason it works is 4 things at once. It is polite and respectful, which gives the officer no excuse to escalate the encounter. It clearly invokes your right to remain silent without using legal jargon that sounds confrontational. It does not lie, does not evade, and does not give the officer ammunition for a deception narrative. It creates a clean record on the body camera that you declined to answer rather than refuse to comply. You can soften the delivery if you want. You can add a small smile. You can say it with respect in your voice, but the position must be firm, because the moment you start answering one travel question, the officer is trained to ask another and another and another until something useful comes out. Saying nothing is not rude. Saying nothing is the entire point of the Fifth Amendment, written by men who knew exactly what governments do when citizens answer too many questions. Chapter 7. What happened to Robert? Robert did not know any of this. When the officer asked where he was coming from, Robert told him. The officer then asked how long he had stayed. Robert told him. The officer asked who he had visited. Robert told him. The officer asked if anyone else had been at the house, what they had been doing, whether anything had been put in the car. Robert kept answering, and while Robert kept talking, the legal clock kept ticking, and the officer kept building. The officer claimed Robert's timeline did not quite match the distance involved. He claimed Robert seemed unusually nervous when discussing the neighborhood he'd visited. He called for a K-9 unit, which arrived 22 minutes later under the cover of the conversation. The K-9 alerted, the car was searched, and nothing illegal was found in the entire vehicle. Robert spent the next 3 hours on the side of that highway. His car was emptied. His belongings were laid out on the shoulder. His wife called 4 times, terrified. By the time he was released with no charges and no apology, the sun had set. His back was aching, and a small piece of his belief in the system was broken. He had done nothing wrong. He had been polite. He had been honest, and honesty about his travel in the wrong moment had cost him his evening, his dignity, and his trust. Chapter 8. How to prepare before your next drive. You do not have to be Robert. The difference between his Sunday night and yours is preparation, and preparation costs you nothing. The most important rights in the Constitution are not the ones written on paper. They are the ones rehearsed in your mouth, so they come out automatically when the pressure hits. There are 4 things every driver should do this week. Say the phrase officer. I prefer not to answer questions about my travel out loud in your car. Watch real body camera footage of traffic stops to desensitize yourself to the pressure of the moment. Practice keeping your hands on the wheel and your voice calm while you say the words. Tell one person in your life about this phrase so they can practice it too. Rehearsal is everything. The officer has rehearsed his questions 1,000 times. He has asked, "Where are you coming from?" in 500 different stops this year alone. He is comfortable. He is calm. He has the home field advantage. The only way to level the field is to come prepared with a sentence that lives in your muscle memory the way his questions live in his. You can build that tonight in your kitchen before the next drive. What to carry home from tonight? The next time you see flashing lights in your rearview mirror? The next time an officer leans in and asks you where you are coming from? In that casual, friendly tone, you will know exactly what is happening. You will know that the question is not small talk. You will know that the answer creates a timeline that can be used against you. You will know about Rodriguez. You will know about Messias. You will know about Robinette. And you will know the 12-word sentence that protects you without disrespecting anyone. Robert did not know. Robert lost 3 hours of his life and a piece of his faith in the system. You do not have to be Robert. You only have to remember the sentence, rehearse the sentence, and use the sentence the next time it matters. Officer, I prefer not to answer questions about my travel. That is your shield. That is your right. That is how you go home. Here's something honest before you close this video. Almost nobody who watched until this point will actually rehearse the sentence. Most viewers will nod, agree, click away, and forget about it by tomorrow morning. Then 6 months from now, a year from now, the lights will appear in their mirror, the officer will lean in. The question will come through the window, and the words will not be there when they need them. Do not be that viewer. Right now, before you do anything else, say it out loud where you are sitting. Officer, I prefer not to answer questions about my travel. 12 words, 1 breath. Say them 3 times. Once for your future self, Once for someone you love who drives, and once because the only rights you actually own are the ones you can speak when your hands are shaking. If you said it out loud, drop the word ready in the comments. I read those, and if this channel is the kind of channel you want more of, you know where the subscribe button is. I will see you in the next one.